Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim and Assalamu alaikum. So let's get started with this lecture. Okay, so this is what we talked about in our last lecture. In our last lecture, we talked about recursion, like what it is, and how can we write a recursive function. So the important thing to remember in that is that every recursive function must have a base case. We talked about what do we mean by a base case, and it must also have a recursive case, and the recursive case should be such that it approaches the base case, and we can have one recursive case or we can have more than one recursive cases, and all those cases they must approach the base case successively over the execution of the recursive function. We must reach the base case. If that does not happen, then this recursive function would be a function that would execute forever. Then we solved at least four different problems using recursion. We found out, we calculated the value of the factorial of an integer recursively. We determined the power of an integer recursively. We talked about the Fibonacci function and we calculated the value, the Fibonacci sequence recursively. And we also talked about the problem or the puzzle, a very important and interesting puzzle called the Towers of Hanoi. We talked about it and we solved that problem or puzzle using recursion. Okay, so that is what we did in our last lecture. In this lecture, we'll start talking about arrays, and on arrays, we'll spend at least 2 or 3 lectures. So we'll talk about like what arrays are and all those things. In this particular lecture, we are not going to cover all these topics. We are only going to cover topics until I guess this part. So we'll talk about arrays, like the introduction, arrays, how do we declare arrays, and how do we use arrays. And in the next lecture, we'll start talking about passing arrays to function, sorting arrays, and all those things. Okay, and perhaps maybe we'll need a third lecture to talk about uh, multiple subscripted arrays or multi-dimensional arrays. Okay, so we may need that. So let's get started. So this is the outline for this lecture. We'll talk about arrays, like we'll do an introduction, then we'll see how do we declare arrays, and then how do we use arrays. So we'll look at all these different aspects of arrays. Now, if you remember, in one of the lab tasks, I asked you to write a function that would find the average. Let me get that function for you, so that like, okay. So let's get that function. Lecture 9. Let's get back here. So I asked you to write a function, and that function, let me check if it was lab 5. So in that function, like you were asked to find out the, to repeat the execution block of code. Okay, let me see. No, it wasn't this one. Let's see lab 6. I guess in lab 6 I asked you to write your own functions, and one of the tasks that I gave you was this function. Uh, Find the average of 10 numbers. Okay, I asked you to write a function that would find the average of 10 numbers, and those 10 numbers were supposed to be passed to that function by the main function. So obviously it is a difficult function to write, in the sense that you needed to specify at least 10 arguments for this function. Okay, so you had to pass 10 integers, so you needed to have 10 arguments, int say a1, comma int a2, comma int a3, int a4, int a5. So that is a lot of work. Okay, and then I asked you, what would you do if you had to find the average of 1000 integers? Like, would you need 1000 arguments? Okay, so if you needed to have 1000 arguments in order to find the average of 1000 integer values or double values, then that would be something very inefficient, okay, and it would be very error prone. You're more likely to make errors there. So this was something that I wanted you to think about, okay, and this is basically the motivation for arrays. So if you have multiple values of the same type, for example, if I want to I want to store the marks or percentage marks for the entire class, for your entire class. So you are around, I guess, 46, 47 guys. Let's make it 50. And if I want to store the marks for all 50 of you, percentage marks for all 50 of you, so I'll need to have at least 46 variables to store those marks. Now, one way is that I declare those 46 variables. That is something very inefficient to do. And the other way is that I use something that we call arrays. Okay, so that is basically the motivation of arrays. If you have multiple values of the same type, then you need arrays to store those values and process those values. So how do we do that? Let's see. So arrays are basically structures of uh, related data items. Related data items means data items one that are of the same type and that they are related in a way that you need to put them together. For example, one example was that if we want to store percentage marks of for computer programming of the entire class, so percentage marks of the entire class, they are related and they are of the same type. So maybe I'll need double variable or a double array to store the percentage marks of the entire class for this course. Okay, so this is what arrays are. They are basically data structures which are used to store related data items. Data structures which are used to store related data items, and those data items are a lot, like there are many, there are too many for individual variables to be able to store them efficiently. Okay, so maybe say for example we may have 1,000 uh, data items to store or 10,000 data items to store, and this is not something that is an unrealistic quantity. In real or actual program, you might need to handle millions of data items, and in order to be able to handle that many data items efficiently, you need data structures to store that data. Okay, the other thing that you need to remember about arrays is that arrays are static entities. Static entity, by that we mean their size remains the same throughout the program. If you have a 10 element array, okay, if you have a 10 element array, then its size remains 10 for the entire duration of the program. If you have a 100 element array, then its size remains 100 for the entire duration of the program. You cannot change the size of an array at runtime. While your program is running, you cannot change the size of your array. For that, you need other data structures that can change their size dynamically at runtime. Okay, so this is what you should remember. Okay, this is again introduction about arrays. So what are arrays? They are basically physically in memory. They are consecutive group of memory locations. Okay, so consecutive means lagatar. So if we have an array of characters, that means those characters are stored consecutively in memory. Okay, so say for example, if this is an uh, array of 5 characters, okay, so those 5 characters would be stored consecutively, one after the other, in the RAM. Okay, and each of these boxes will store one character. Say for example, this stores the character A, this stores the character, say, C, this stores the character, say, T. Okay, this stores the character, say, I. This stores the character V, and let's add another element, make it an array of 6 characters. This is E. So this is what we mean by array. Physically inside the RAM, this would be a contiguous group of memory locations. So each character would be following the other one in a contiguous means memory locations that are adjacent to each other, एक दूसरे के साथ लगे हुए हों, और consecutive means लगातार. Okay, so they mean one and the same thing. Now for an array, they have the same type. Okay, all the elements in an array, they must have the same type. If this is an array of characters, so all these boxes will be allowed to store characters only. So we can have an array of integers, then all these boxes will be, or these memory locations, they will be storing integers only. Then we can have an array of characters or floats or doubles. Okay, so the elements stored inside an array, they have the same name and they have the same type. Okay, they have the same name and they have the same type. If they have the same name, then how do we differentiate between individual elements? That is also an important question. So if elements in an array have the same name and same type, then how do we identify individual elements? So we identify individual elements by something that we call an index. Okay, something that we call an index. And what is an index? An index basically tells you the position of that element inside that array. Like, what is the position of the element inside this particular array? So the index always starts from 0, that is the minimum index, and it goes up until the length of the array minus 1. So if this array is of 6 elements, so it will start from 0 and go to 6 minus 1, 5. So the index of this element would be 0, this element 1, for this element the index is 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, and this is a 6 element array. So in C++, the index of elements in an array, it always starts from 0. It always starts from 0. And the maximum value that it can have is the length of the array minus 1. So if the length of the array is 6, so the maximum value of the index would be 5. Okay, so the first element is always at position 0 or at index 0. If you need to access individual elements, so this is how you access it. You specify the name of the array and then you specify the index or position number. Okay, we'll do that, then it'll be clear. So these are examples. For example, we have an array C, which is an n element array. It has n elements. Here I have written capital N, and here we are using small n, make it small n. Okay, so this is how those elements, individual elements, can be accessed. So this is the first element in this array, the array at position 0. So the first element in a C++ array is at position 0 or at index 0. Okay, so the index always starts from 0. This is the second element, and this is how you access it. You specify the name of the array, just like we mentioned here, array name. Then within square brackets you specify the position or index for the element that you want to access. Okay, so this is how you specify, this is how you access this. So this is how you access the first element in the array at position or index 0. This is how you access the second element in the array at index 1 or position 1. And this is how you access the final element in the array, the element at index n minus 1, where n is the size of the array. N is the size of the array or length of the array. So nth element in the array is at position n minus 1. First element is at position 0, and the nth element or last element is at position n minus 1. This is what you should remember about arrays. Okay. So array elements, they are just like other variables. Like, you can use them just like other variables. Okay. So this is an array element. If you want to assign it some value, you can assign it value just like any other variable. Okay. So you access that individual element and you assign it some value. If you want to print it, print an element of the array, you can print it exactly like any other variable. Okay, so you just access that element inside the array and you just print it. Okay, so this is how you do it. And similarly, like, you can multiply it with other numbers, divide it, and use it in operations just like other variables. Similarly, the index or position, it can be specified just by using a constant value. It can be specified using a variable, say for example I or j. It can be specified using some expression, like here we have specified it as 5 minus 2, so it will be evaluated The index will be calculated, it is 3, and then that element will be accessed. Okay, so you can perform operations inside subscript. This is also called subscript. This is also called subscript. Like usually, if you remember from your discussion of matrices in your FSC, so this is how we denoted the individual elements of a matrix, AII, or say A11. Okay, Aij. Say this was the general notation. Ith row, jth column. A12. That means this element is in first row, second column. Okay, so these are subscripts. These are subscripts. These elements are multi-subscripted elements or multi-dimensional. They have two dimension, rows and columns. Okay, here we are talking about a single unidimensional vector or array. So it has a single subscript. It has a single subscript. Okay, so here we are talking about say A1, A0. In this particular case, it is C. So let us write it as C. So we are talking about C0, C1, okay, or Cn minus 1. So this is the subscript 0, 1, n minus 1. These are subscripts. So here we are saying that you can perform operations inside the subscript by specifying. In order to specify the subscript or index, you can do operations as well. So the compiler will first calculate the value of this expression and then use that value to access that particular element. Okay. Okay. This is basically an illustration of how an integer array, for example, C is an integer array, and it has 12 elements. It has, so C is this array. It has 12 elements. Okay? C is an array, and it has 12 elements. This is how it's going to look inside the RAM. Okay. So each location is for storing one integer value. Okay, so it has a minus 45, 6, 0, 72. So all these are integer values. If you want to access this value, this is how you can access it. You need to provide the name of the array, and then within square brackets you need to provide the index or subscript or position. So the first position in this array is 0. Okay, the second one is 1, and then 2, 3, 4, and the final position is the size of the array minus 1, or the length of the array minus 1. So this is a 12 element array. So the final element will be at index 11. The final element will be at index 11. Okay, and these are all contiguous inside your random access memory. If you like find out the addresses of these elements, the address of C0, C1, C2, C3, so they will be contiguous locations. Contiguous matlab कि लगातार होंगे, consecutive होंगे और contiguous एक दूसरे के साथ जुड़े हुए होंगे. ठीक है, so they will be लगातार. Okay, so this is how the array would look inside the RAM. Now we'll do a couple of examples, and that will clarify it further. So first let us learn how do you declare arrays. So in order to declare arrays, just like any other variable, so in order to declare any variable, you first specify the type. Okay, say for example you want to declare an integer variable, so you specify the type and then you specify the name, say int a. Okay, that is what you do with a normal variable. That is what you do with a normal variable. With an array, you just specify one additional quantity, and that is the number of elements, and that you do within square brackets. So at the time of declaration, these square brackets contain the size of the array. So say for example we say int a 20. That means a would be an integer array that would have 20 elements or 20 integer values, that would be able to store 20 integer values. This is how you declare an array. You specify the type, you specify the name of the array just like for any other variables, and then within square brackets you specify the size of the array, and then you terminate the statement with a semicolon. Okay, you terminate the statement with a semicolon. So this is for example a declaration of an array of 10 integers. This is C. This is an array of 20 integers in array A. This is an array of 3284 floats. okay, D. So you can do that. And similarly, like you can declare multiple arrays in a single statement. You can do that as well. We'll do that, and then it will be clear to you. So once you declare an array, just like the other variables, arrays are not initialized. They all the elements of the array, they have garbage element. They have garbage values. Okay, so you need to initialize the elements of the array. And in order to initialize the elements of array, since arrays have multiple elements, so that means like you need to repeat the process of initialization multiple times for each element in the array. Okay, that means in order to initialize arrays, you might need to use loops. This is one way of initializing an array. Or you might initialize an array using an initializer list. What do you mean by an initializer list? An initializer list means that you specify each element when the array is declared. So this is a 5-element array, and for each element you specify the value, and you do that within these curly braces. You do that within these curly braces. So you specify an initializer list for array using curly braces. Okay, so you remember we use the square brackets to specify the size of the array at the time of declaration. Once the array is declared, okay, we use the square brackets to access individual elements. And if we want to initialize the elements of array with values of our choice using an initializer list, so we use the curly braces to do that. Okay, so you should remember this syntax. You should remember this syntax. So we can use these curly braces to initialize all these 5 elements of the array. Okay, say for example, here you should remember a thing or two. This array has 5 elements, and these initial values that we specified, these are also 5. So this is good. Okay. If for example we have an array, in this particular case, this is a 5-element array, but we only specify 0. Okay. So that means all the elements in this array would be set to 0, the same value. If for example we have an array of 15 elements and we specify only 5 values, that means the first 5 elements would have these values and the remaining 10 elements would have 0 as their initial values. Okay, so you should remember that. If we have an array of 15 elements and in the initializer list we provide 20 elements or 16 elements, then that would be a syntax error. Your compiler would flag an error. Okay, you are providing too many initial values for an array which is not of that size. Okay, and similarly, if you at the time of declaration, if you do not specify the size of the array, then you must specify an initializer list, and depending upon the size of the initializer list, the size of this array would be determined. The size of this array would be determined. Okay, so I hope this is clear. Now let's do an example. We'll declare a 10-element integer array. We will access the elements of that array, individual elements, print those elements on the screen, and then we'll initialize it using different ways. And one of those ways is using random values. This is very important. Okay, so you should pay close attention to it. So let's write this code. Let us keep these annotations and let us get back here. Let me create a new project. This would be a console application, and here we are going to play with arrays. Okay, so this is regarding arrays, and this is the first project related to arrays. So let's create that. So in this example, what we are going to do is we are going to create an integer array of how many elements? 10 elements. Okay, so let's do that. So int integer array. Okay, so let us name it as what? Say this is int array. Okay, so let us call it as int arr. So int array. So how do you create or declare an array? You first specify the type. So this is going to be an integer array. It is going to store multiple integer values. Then you specify the name. Then you specify the size. So this is going to be a 10 element array. This is defined like this is what we want to do. So this will create a 10 element array. This will create a 10 element array. Okay. Now let us verify that this is a 10 element array. So we need to print all these elements in this array. Okay, so let us do that. How are we going to do that? So these are 10 elements, and we are going to access these elements, individual elements, using their indexes. The indexes would start from 0 and go up until size minus 1. So size of this array is 10, so they would go up, start from 0 and go up until 9. Okay, so let's do that. Let us use a for loop. So for int I is equal to 0, so the index I will start from 0 and it would go up until 9, less than or equal to 9, which is basically size minus 1. Size of the array is 10 and 9 is basically 10 minus 1, and then increment I. So here what are we going to do? We are going to access individual elements of this array and print their values. Okay, so this is what we want to do. We want to print to the user that int array, I want formatted output. Okay, so int array I, the ith element of this array is equal to, okay, and then let us access the ith element. So how do you access the element of an array? You type the name of that array, and then within square brackets you specify the index. So the index here is I starts from 0, and then it will go to 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9. Okay, so one by one we are going to access these individual elements of this array, and then end L. Okay, so this loop will print all the elements of this array, all the 10 elements of this array. The elements, how do we access those elements? We access those elements using the name of the array and the index or position number of the element. So the index starts from 0 and goes up until size minus 1. Size here is 10, so 10 minus 1 is 9. So that is why we have 9 here. So let's see if this code works or not. Let us first compile this code and then build and run. Okay, so this is the original array and it has garbage values, and you can see like some values are 8, some 0, whatever, like different values. Okay, so this we can print this statement here. Says this is the original uninitialized array. This is the uninitialized array. Okay, so this is the uninitialized array, and let us print this message before actually printing the array. Okay, so this is 0. Okay, so this is the uninitialized array. Now how would you initialize this array? Okay, so let us use we'll use this code for printing the array because we'll need to print it again and again. Okay, how do you initialize the array? So the first way that we want to initialize each element to 0, and then we want to print those elements. Okay, so let us do that. Let us copy this code, okay, and then print it here. So this is the array elements initialized to 0. Okay, array elements initialized to 0. This is what we want to do first. So we want to initialize each and every element to 0. How do you do that? Very simple. Just access each element. How do you access it? Type the name of the array, then specify the index. So the index is going to be I. Okay, initialize it to 0. So this is how you initialize. You access the individual element and you assign it some value, just like any other variable. Just like any other variable. For example, if you had any other integer variable, int x, so how would you assign it some value? You would simply say x is equal to 0. Okay, x is equal to 0. And this is how you do it with elements of an array. So you simply say int array, and then you specify okay, which particular element inside this array do you want to access. You specify the index. So if I is equal to 0, so you're basically accessing the 0th or first element in the array, and then you assign it this value. I becomes 1, and you are basically accessing the second element in this array at index 1. Then 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and similarly you access all the elements, and then you print those elements. Okay. So this basically initializes all the elements in the array to the value 0. Let us build and run this code. Okay, so array elements initialized to 0. So all the elements in this array have been initialized to 0. Okay, and then we printed those elements as well. Okay, what do we need to do next? Next is initialize the array with an initializer list. Okay, so we can do that as well. And how can we do that? So let us see. I guess we can do it here. Int array. You basically do that at the time of declaration. The initializer list, you do that at the time of declaration. So let us create another. Either we have to comment out this code. Let me comment out this code. Okay. Uh, so let us comment out this code. We are using the C style comment. Okay, we have commented out this code, and let us use an initializer list to initialize these values. How do you use an initializer list? So within curly braces, you need to specify the initial values for elements of this array. You can specify values for all the 10 elements, like say you can say 4, 5, 7, 8, 3, 2, 9, 1, 0. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is remaining, I guess. 6. So these are 10 values, I guess. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, so you can specify a value each for all the 10 elements in this array. You can do that, and then you can print this array. Okay, let us print it. I'm copying this code and then placing it here. So array initialized using initializer list, using initializer, using an initializer list, using an initializer list. Okay, so this is how we initialize this array. So you would be able to see these values there. Let me get rid of this thing, and let us get rid of this thing as well. Okay, we have done that here. We are just printing it here. So let us see how does this code work. Let us build and run. See, so this the first value goes to the first position, second position, and so on and so forth. So this is how you can initialize the elements of an array using initializer list. Here this is a 10 element array, and we specified all 10 values. Let us specify more than 10, say for example 11, 10. Okay, so we are specifying 10, 12 values. Let's see what does the compiler say. So the compiler is objecting we have too many initializers for a 10 element array, so we cannot do that. Okay, let us get rid of those values. Let us specify fewer values. Say for example, let us get rid of these values. So now we have 4, 5, 7, 8, 3, 5 values. We specified 5 initial values for 5 elements, and for the rest of the elements we did not specify any values. What happens then? So it does not object, so that means the other values would be initialized to 0. So let's verify. So the first 5 values are assigned to the first 5 elements starting from position or index 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and the remaining elements, they are initialized with the value 0. If you want to initialize all of them to the value 0, you just need to specify 0 here, just one value 0, and all of these will be, all of these 10 elements of the array int array, they would be initialized to the value 0. Okay, so I guess we have looked at all the different possibilities of using the initializer list. You can also ask the user to input values for the elements of the array. You can do that. Okay, this is also uh, this can also be done. Okay, so this is how we basically initialize the elements of array using an initializer list, and this particular initializer list specifies only one value, and that is 0. So it will initialize all the elements in this array to 0. अच्छा, अगर आप कहें कि जी अगर हम 0 के अलावा किसी और वैल्यू से इनिशियलाइज करना चाहते हैं, फॉर एग्जांपल we want to initialize all the elements to 2, so if we specify 2 here, क्या ये हो जाएगा? So no, that won't work. This value would be applied only to the first element in this array, and the remaining elements, those elements would be initialized to 0. ठीक है, तो जो इफेक्ट आप चाहते हैं कि सारे elements की initial value 2 हो जाए, वो नहीं होगी. ठीक है, you can verify that. Let us verify that. Compile करें इसको and then build and run. So here you can see the first element is initialized with the value 2, and the remaining elements, they are initialized with the value 0. So this happens only in the case of 0, कि आप यहाँ अगर यहाँ 0 स्पेसिफाई करें तो चूंकि बाज़ जो एलिमेंट्स आप जिनकी इनिशियल वैल्यू आप स्पेसिफाई नहीं कर रहे होते वो तो बाय डिफ़ॉल्ट दे आर इनिशियलाइज्ड विद 0, तो ये जो 0 है दिस इज अप्लाइड टू द फर्स्ट एलिमेंट. ठीक है, तो तमाम एलिमेंट्स इस तरीके से 0 की वैल्यू पे इनिशियलाइज हो जाते हैं. Now we wanted to get input from the user कि वो user input specify करे, so that is also possible. ठीक है, so let us get rid of this thing and let us ask the user to specify values for all the elements of this array. ठीक है, so अगर 10 elements की array है तो user ने फिर 10 integer values enter करनी होंगी. ठीक है, and you can print appropriate messages for that. For example, let us say enter, please enter, please enter 10 integer values for a 10 element integer array. ठीक है, so you can print a message like this and then the user would start providing those values. Definitely you'll need a loop, so for int I is equal to 0, I less than or equal to say 9, and then plus I, and here you are going to ask the user to provide you with the value. So यहाँ पे हम क्या कह रहे हैं जी, हम कहेंगे cin, so the user will type in the value. Where should that value go? That value should go to the ith element of the integer array. ठीक है, so पहले 0th element या first element, फिर second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth and 10th. So the first element है वो है at index 0, second is at index 1, then 2, 3, 4, 5 up until 9. So these indexes, these run up until 9. So this is how we can get elements from the user. Now we'll run this code. अच्छा, तो यहाँ पे फिर हम उसको उस array को print कर रहे हैं. अच्छा, यहाँ पे देखें प्रिंटिंग का काम हम बार बार कर रहे हैं, तो दैट मीन्स कि you should have a function जिसको आप you can pass the array and it will print all the elements of that array for you. Okay, so this is ideally this is what should happen. तो फिलहाल तो हम यहीं पे मेन में ही कर रहे हैं. so यहाँ पे क्या होगा, आउटपुट ये सॉरी टेक्स्ट array initialized by the user. ठीक है, तो let us array initialized by the user. Let us change this message. ठीक है, okay, so let's compile this code and then build and run it. Okay, so the message is please enter 10 integer values for a 10 element integer array. So let's enter those values. 45, then this is the value for the first element at index 0, for the second element at index 1, for the third element at index 2, for the fourth element at index 3, for the fifth element at index 5, 4, sorry, for the sixth element at index 5, for the seventh element at index 6, for the eighth element at index 7, for the ninth element at index 8, and for the 10th element at index 9. Okay? So this is how we initialize it. Ask the user to enter values for the array, and these are those values जो कि हमने प्रिंट की हैं, यूज़र से ली हैं, जिनकी मदद से हमने अरे को इनिशियलाइज़ किया है और फिर उन वैल्यूज़ को हम प्रिंट कर रहे हैं. ठीक है. अच्छा. Okay, the next thing that we need to do is initialize the array with random values. Now random values, these are also very important. अच्छा, random values से मुराद क्या है हमारी, पहले उसको let us talk about that. So random values से मुराद ये है कि these are those values which are automatically generated by a function that we call the random number generator. Okay, so the random number generator is a standard library function. We call that function, and that function generates a random value for us between this range 0 and 32,767. ठीक है. सो ज़ीरो से लेके 32,767 के बीच एक रैंडम वैल्यू वो आपको जनरेट करके दे देता है. ठीक है. इसके फ़वाइद हैं. वी यूज़ द रैंडम वैल्यू फॉर सिमुलेटिंग डिफरेंट डिफरेंट फिनोमेना. जैसे फॉर एग्जांपल वी कैन यूज़ द रैंडम नंबर जनरेटर टू सिमुलेट द coin tossing. If you are tossing a coin, so the coin, when you toss it, and when it lands, it has two possible outcomes: either you'll get a heads or a tails. ठीक है. Similarly, we can use it for simulating the outcome of rolling a die. Die से मुराद छक्का है. जब आप लूडो खेल रहे होते हैं तो आप छक्के को बार बार रोल करते हैं. ठीक है. And when you roll a die, you have six possible outcomes: either you'll get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. And all these six possible outcomes, they are equally likely. इनकी probability of occurrence is the same. Their probability of occurrence is the same. ठीक है. Now if you want to use a program, if you want to write a computer program that wants to simulate the tossing of a coin or roll of a die, then you would need a function like random number generator जो कि आपको randomly numbers generate करके दे, and that sequence should be in some sense, यानी वो आपको numbers बार बार generate कर रहा है, and those numbers ideally they should not repeat themselves. But since we are using a computer to generate these random numbers, these are not truly random numbers. These are in fact pseudo random numbers, and these numbers are going to repeat themselves. ठीक है. अच्छा. So लेकिन still, like, these are good enough, and we can use them to simulate different phenomena and to write interesting programs. For example, let's say you want to write a program that wants to help students practice addition problems. ठीक है. Students को आपने practice देनी है कि वो अपनी addition को improve कर सकें. So how can you do that? So for that you need to generate problems of addition, and then you need to ask the student कि उनको add करें, and once they add you need to check the answer. आप उनसे answer लें, and then you need to verify कि आया उन्होंने उस problem को ठीक तरीके से solve किया या नहीं. Answer को check करना है. ठीक है. Which you can do very easily, and then you can give them another problem and another problem, and this way you can create or write a quiz program. And this quiz program would only be like effective, and you would only be able to write it if you have this ability of generating random numbers, random sums आप generate कर सकें. ठीक है. Acha. So this is about the utility of random numbers or rand function. So we are going to generate random numbers using the rand function. This rand function is in this library, C standard library. So we need to include this header file in order to use this rand function. We'll do that. ठीक है वो now. Now the rand function, when it is executed, so it generates a random value between 0 and 32,767. नाउ ये रेंज है वैल्यूज़ की जो कि ये जनरेट करता है, बट मोस्ट ऑफन वी डोंट नीड वैल्यूज़ इन दिस रेंज, वी नीड टू स्केल दिस रेंज से मुराद वी नीड टू चेंज the maximum value that we are getting and the minimum value that we are getting. So in order to do that, we need to do scaling and shifting. How do we do that? So you can do scaling by using the modulo operator. For example, what does the modulo operator do? It basically calculates the remainder. If you divide 10 by 3, the remainder is 1. So 10 modulo 3 is 1. That is what it is. Okay? Similarly, x modulo y is basically the remainder that you'll get after dividing x by y. Now, what is the range of these values? ठीक है, यानी x को अगर आप y से डिवाइड करते हैं तो रिमाइंडर की मिनिमम वैल्यू क्या होगी, मैक्सिमम वैल्यू क्या होगी. अगर आप 10 को डिवाइड करते हैं बाय 3 या किसी भी नंबर को, फॉर एग्जांपल यू डिवाइड x बाय 3, सो द रिमाइंडर वुड बी आइदर 0, 1 और 2. ठीक है, remainder would be 0, 1 or 2. If you divide 9 by 3, it is completely divisible, so remainder is 0. If you divide 10 by 3, so remainder is 1. If you divide 11 by 3, the remainder is 2. फिर आगे 12 आ जाता है, which is completely divisible by 3, तो remainder फिर से 0 हो जाता है. So in general, if you divide x by y, the remainder is going to be between 0 and y minus 1. So this allows you to scale the output of this rand function. तो अगर रैंड फंक्शन को हम डिवाइड करें बाय 6, इसकी आउटपुट को डिवाइड करें बाय 6 यानी मॉड्यूलर लें विद 6, सो ये जो एक्सप्रेशन है दिस विल गिव अस वैल्यूज बिटवीन 0 एंड 5. और इसके साथ फिर अगर हम 1 ऐड कर लें तो 1 मिनिमम के साथ भी ऐड कर लें, 1 मैक्सिमम के साथ भी, तो रेंज वुड बिकम 1 एंड 6, बिटवीन 1 एंड 6. ठीक है, so आपको अगर if you need to simulate the roll of a die, so then you need to generate values between 1 and 6 ताकि आपको पता लगे कितनी मरतबा इक्का आया है, कितनी मरतबा दुक्की आई है, कितनी मरतबा चौका आया है, छक्का आया है. You need to find out that, so you need to scale the output of this rand function. ठीक है, now we'll first learn how to use the rand function and then we will do the scaling, and then we'll do the initialization and all those things one by one. And then there are some things that are important regarding the rand function, so we'll talk about that as well. So in order to be able to use the rand function, we need to use this library. We need to include the C standard library. ठीक है, we need to include this library. अच्छा, यहाँ हमने अब क्या करना है, यहाँ हमने अब इस array को initialize करना है using random values. ठीक है, so let me comment this part of the code as well. अच्छा, इसको मैं यहाँ नीचे लेके आ रहा हूँ. अच्छा, control plus X and then control plus V. This is going to array initialized using random values. ठीक है, using random values. अच्छा, now let us generate those random values. ठीक है, वो random values generate करने के लिए we are going to use the rand function, and the rand function is part of the C standard library, so उसको हमने include कर लिया. Now let us use the rand function. How are we going to use the rand function? So this is how we are going to use the rand function. अब हमने इन values को, array की values को initialize करना है. So int array ith element of the array, we want to initialize it with a value returned by the rand function. ठीक है, so this is how you call the rand function, rand. So this function, when you call it, it will return you a random value, a value selected or chosen randomly between 0 and 32,767. So इस range में कोई भी एक value आपको randomly उठा के दे देगा, and that value is then copied into this thing, and then we print it. ठीक है, so let us build and run and see how does this work. So 10 random values हम उठा रहे हैं. So the first random value is 41, then 18,467, 6,334, and so on and so forth. So these are values randomly chosen from that range. अच्छा, इस प्रोग्राम को अब हम दोबारा रन करेंगे and then you'll see फिर वही values हमें मिल रही हैं. If you remember, the first value was 41, then 18,467, 6334. फिर आप कहेंगे कि जी these are not random. ठीक है, हाँ जी, क्लियरली इट इज़ नॉट रैंडम. अगर बार बार इस प्रोग्राम को हम रन करेंगे, सो वही वैल्यूज़ अगर हमें मिल रही हैं तो फिर तो ये रैंडम ना हुई. ठीक है, सो दैट इज़ अ वेरी legitimate concern कि these values are not random. So let us tie up this discussion. ये random numbers का जो discussion है इसको let us tie it up first. Then we'll come to scaling. ठीक है, अच्छा फिर हम scaling की बात करेंगे. अच्छा, random number जो generator होता है, what it does is it starts with a seed मतलब तुखम, and then it does some operations on that seed value and it gives one random value जिसको ये रिटर्न करता है, जिसको हम प्रिंट करते हैं. So that value is say 41. Then it takes 41, does some sequence of operations on 41, it gives you the second value. वो कोई 18,000 something थी. And it keeps on doing that. अब every time we call the rand function, इसकी जो seed value है that is fixed. Seed value इसकी क्या है? Fixed है. ठीक है? So it always starts from the same seed value. That is why इस प्रोग्राम को आप जितनी मरतबा भी रन करेंगे आपको पहली वैल्यू 41 मिलेगी, दूसरी वैल्यू 18,468 मिलेगी. ठीक है, अगर आप चाहते हैं कि नहीं ये सीक्वेंस को चेंज करना है, सो इन ऑर्डर टू चेंज द सीक्वेंस यू नीड टू चेंज द सीड वैल्यू ऑफ द रैंडम नंबर जनरेटर. इसकी सीड वैल्यू को चेंज करना है. फॉर दैट you need to call another function. So this function is for change the seed value of the random number generator. कैसे करेंगे? उसके लिए जिस फंक्शन को आपने कॉल करना है दैट इज द srand फंक्शन. एंड srand फंक्शन को यू कैन स्पेसिफाई अ सीड वैल्यू. से मैं इसको 2021 की सीड वैल्यू स्पेसिफाई करता हूँ. ठीक है, इट इज द करंट ईयर. अच्छा, नाउ लेट अस सी, कंपाइल एंड देन बिल्ड एंड रन. अब अगर आप देखें पहली वैल्यू 41 नहीं है, it is 6638, then 5064, then 14392, 6682. ठीक है, very good. Like हम we were successful in changing the sequence of random number generator. जो उसका sequence हमें मिल रहा है वो हमने change कर दिया. ठीक है, very good. But there's a problem. When you run this same code, you are going to get the same sequence. ठीक है, क्योंकि सीड वैल्यू हमने अब 2021 कर दिया, तो 2021 ही है. ठीक है, इसका मतलब ये है कि ईच टाइम यू रन, इफ़ यू वांट अ डिफरेंट सीक्वेंस एवरी टाइम यू रन दिस प्रोग्राम, देन यू नीड टू स्पेसिफाई अ सीड वैल्यू जो कि हर वक्त चेंज होती रहे. सम सीड वैल्यू विच इज़ टाइड अप टू टाइम. टाइम हर वक्त चेंज होता है, तो ऐसी सीड वैल्यू हमें चाहिए जो कि हर वक्त चेंज हो. ठीक है, only then we'll be able to get random values that are that are random in some sense. ठीक है, अभी तो ये बिल्कुल भी रैंडम नहीं है, वही सीक्वेंस हमें बार बार मिल रहा है. ठीक है, अगर आप इस इफ़ यू जनरेट 1000 रैंडम वैल्यूज़, तो वो 1000 का सीक्वेंस जो है वो तो एक दूसरे से वो 1000 वैल्यूज़ मुख्तलिफ होंगी, रैंडम होंगी. बट अगर इसी प्रोग्राम को आप बार बार रन करते हैं ना, सो यू विल गेट द सेम 1000 वैल्यूज़. ठीक है, and random numbers are very important. You must have heard about casinos and all that, जिसमें computers या वो आपके साथ गेम खेल रहे होते हैं, and those games they utilize random numbers. ठीक है, and those random numbers need to be very good. Like उनको random होना चाहिए and they should be random in a sense कि casino को फ़ायदा हो, जो बंदा है उसको थोड़ा सा नुकसान हो. ठीक है, so those random numbers are generated or created by by hiring specialist people, and they charge a good amount of money in order to design such random number generators. So ये important field है, इतनी गैर अहम नहीं है. अच्छा, now coming back to the original question कि we want a seed value that changes with time. ठीक, that changes with time. In that then we would have a random number generator जो कि हर मर्तबा जब भी आप, चूंकि टाइम चेंज हो चुका होगा, जब भी आप उसको रन करेंगे, so it will give you a different sequence. So right now each time you run this, so the first random value is going to be 6638. क्यों? क्योंकि आपने random value 2021 रखिए। अगर हम इसको ले जाएं से 1902 कर दें फॉर एग्ज़ाम्पल, या 1947 कर दें, 14 अगस्त का दिन है, का महीना है, सो देन we will have a different sequence, ठीक है। but again if you don't change 1947 you are going to get the same sequence, 6396 पहली value and so on and so forth. So we need to make the seed value something that changes with time. अच्छा वो कैसे? For that we need to use the time function. Okay, C++ में we have a time function. That time function is defined in the C time library. So let us include the C time library. Okay, and let us call the time function from that library. Okay, the seed value would be specified by the time function. Okay, so time is a function, so we need to provide it some arguments. ठीक है, अच्छा टाइम को क्या आर्गुमेंट चाहिए? सो लेट अस प्रोवाइड इट द आर्गुमेंट 0. बस रिमेंबर इट कि टाइम फंक्शन को हम कॉल करेंगे और टाइम फंक्शन जो है उसको हम 0 की इनपुट देंगे या 0 की आर्गुमेंट देंगे, ठीक है। सो इट विल रिटर्न अस अ न्यूमेरिकल वैल्यू, a number that changes every second. That numerical value changes every second, ठीक है। So let us compile this code and then build and run. अच्छा, सो अब आप देखें ना, पहली जो रैंडम वैल्यू आपको मिली है वो है 1068, ठीक है। रन इट अगेन, 1098, रन इट अगेन, 1114, ठीक है। तो पहली डिफरेंट है, दे आर मोर और लेस द सेम, यानी करीब करीब ही हैं बट डिफरेंट हैं, और इसके डिफरेंट होने से आपका पूरा सीक्वेंस जो है वो डिफरेंट हो जाता है, ठीक है। रन इट अगेन, 1173, देन 28,881, एट्सेट्रा एट्सेट्रा, ठीक है। So in this particular code, what we have achieved is we have achieved the ability to generate a random sequence of numbers each time this program is run, ठीक है। और वो हमने कैसे किया है? वो हमने किया है by changing the seed value of the random number generator. This is the random number generator. इसकी seed value हमने change की है by using the srand function, and we have changed this value, the seed value, by providing it something, some input that always changes with time. अब time ये जो function है ये क्या हमें return करता है ये भी मैं आपको बता दूं. So the time function, it basically returns us the number of seconds since January 1st 1970. ये जो time function जिसको हम call कर रहे हैं इसको हमने null की value pass की है. Null means zero. So we are giving it 0 as input. अब ये हमें क्या return करता है? It returns us the number of seconds that have passed since January 1st 1970. अब आप पूछेंगे कि ऐसा क्यों है, जनवरी 1st क्यों, 1970 ही क्यों? तो फिलहाल उस डिस्कशन में नहीं पढ़ते. The important thing is कि हमने we have been able to generate a different random sequence each time our program is run, and the way we have been able to do it, random number को generate करने के लिए you call the random function repeatedly, but in order to get a different random sequence each time your program executes, you need to change the seed of the random number generator before calling the random function, random number rand function. उसको कॉल करने से पहले आपने उसकी सीड को चेंज करना है, and usually you do it once during your program. You don't need to do it all the time, so you do it once during your program. So once your program के बिल्कुल स्टार्ट में उसकी रैंडम नंबर जनरेटर की सीड वैल्यू चेंज हो जाए, so then for the duration of that program you are going to get random numbers, ठीक है। अच्छा, इन रैंडम नंबर्स को हम सूडो रैंडम नंबर्स कहते हैं. सूडो रैंडम नंबर्स मीन्स दे आर नॉट ट्रू रैंडम नंबर्स, दे आर बेसिकली रैंडम नंबर्स इन अ लिमिटेड सेंस, ठीक है। ये दिस इज बेसिकली अ प्री सेट और प्री डिटर्मिन्ड सीक्वेंस ऑफ रैंडम नंबर्स दैट वी आर गेटिंग. इसमें थोड़ी सी बेहतरी हम लाते हैं जब हम रैंडम नंबर जनरेटर के सीड को चेंज कर देते हैं. Even if you change the seed of the random number generator, still this random number generator is not good enough कि ये आपको टिल टाइम इंडेफिनिट रैंडम नंबर्स ही जनरेट करके दे। अगर आप इस प्रोग्राम को से फॉर इफ़ यू रन इट फॉर अ लॉन्ग ड्यूरेशन ऑफ टाइम, सो मे बी देयर इज़ अ चांस पॉसिबिलिटी कि ये जो रैंडम नंबर जनरेटर है इट विल स्टार्ट रिपीटिंग इटसेल्फ। ठीक है, ये जो सीक्वेंस है इट विल स्टार्ट रिपीटिंग इटसेल्फ। ठीक है, so this is a possibility, this can happen. Acha, now come back to scaling and shifting. So the rand function, it gives us value between 0 and 32,767. 32,767. If we want values in a particular range, so we can do scaling and shifting for that. In order to do scaling, you need to use the modulo operator. You need to use the modulo operator. So modulo क्या करता है, वो इस नंबर को डिवाइड कर देता है बाय सम नंबर, एंड आपको फॉर एग्जांपल if you divide x by y, so x modulo y would give you values or integer values between the range 0 and y minus 1. ठीक है, so this basically allows you to scale down जो maximum value that you can get. maximum value भी 32,000 है, अगर आप चाहते हैं कि उससे कम वैल्यू आपको मिले, so you can use the modulo operator. So whatever is the value of y, the maximum value that you'll get is y minus 1. एंड से अगर आपको इनिशियल वैल्यू ज़ीरो नहीं पसंद और फाइनल वैल्यू y माइनस वन नहीं पसंद, सो देन यू कैन डू शिफ्टिंग बाय एडिंग सम कांस्टेंट वैल्यू, so it will shift the minimum and maximum value in both cases. ठीक है, so let's see, let us do that. So first of all, let's see कि हम बजाय इसके कि हमारे पास 0 से लेके 32,000 तक की वैल्यूज़ आएँ, we want those values to be we want to simulate the role of a die, say for example. So we apply this modulo operator. So rand की जो भी output होगी, we are dividing it by 6, and that value, the remainder of that, we are assigning it to this element of the array, the ith element of the array. जब आप इसको divide by 6 कर देते हैं, you look at the remainder, so the range of values that you are going to get is 0 to 6 minus 1 और 0 to 5. ठीक है, इस रेंज में फिर आपको वैल्यूज मिलेंगी. ठीक है, लेट अस वेरीफाई दैट कि इस रेंज में हमें वैल्यूज मिलती हैं या नहीं मिलती. ठीक है, सो लेट अस बिल्ड कंपाइल दिस कोड एंड लेट अस बिल्ड एंड रन. सो अब आप देखेंगे आपको ये जो वैल्यूज है ना, वो 0 से लेके 5 तक की रेंज में मिलेंगी. क्यों? क्योंकि वी आर taking its modulo with 6, so the range is now 0 to 6 minus 1 or 0 to 5. So you have 5 3 4 1 4 0 3 3 4 1. ठीक है, now these are not our desired values क्योंकि we want to simulate the role of a die. छक्के को simulate करना चाहते हैं, तो छक्के में ज़ीरो भी नहीं होता, ज़ीरो नहीं होता छक्के में, और छक्के में छक्का होता है, तो यहाँ पे we are getting 0 and we are not getting 6. So we need to do some shifting. And how do you do that shifting? So you just need to add 1 to it. Sorry. So अब जो the minimum value that it used to give you was 0 and the maximum value that this expression used to give you was 5. When you add 1 to it, तो range आपकी 0 से 5 के बजाय 1 से 6 हो जाएगी. So add this shifting factor to both the minimum value of this expression and the maximum. So then you'll get the new range. अच्छा, अब इसको let us compile it and then build and run it. So now we are getting these values 4 1 3 2 6 2 6 1 1 3. ठीक है, we are getting these values, और ये values हैं from 1 to 6. So these values they kind of simulate the roll of a die. छक्के को जब आप रोल करते हैं तो उस रोलिंग को ये सिमुलेट करता है. फिजिकल रोल, वी आर नॉट सिमुलेटिंग द फिजिकल रोलिंग ऑफ अ डाई. ठीक है, वी आर नॉट शोइंग अ डाई फ्लाइंग अप एंड देन कमिंग डाउन एंड देन बाउंसिंग ऑन द फ्लोर. वो हम नहीं कर रहे. वी आर जस्ट सिमुलेटिंग द आउटकम. when you roll a die, when you throw a die, so the outcome is one of these six possible values, 1 2 3 4 5 or 6. 5 हमें यहाँ इस वक्त नहीं मिला, but maybe in another run we may get 5 as well. ठीक है, 3 4 6 3 4 3 4 2 4 6, यहाँ पे 1 और 5 दोनों नहीं मिले. so maybe in another run 1 5 2 4 2 3 6 यहाँ पे चार छः की छः वैल्यूज हमें मिल गई हैं, ठीक है. So we can initialize the elements of an array using random values as well, and you generate random values using the rand function, which is the random number generator. The rand function gives you values in this range 0 से लेके 32,767 तक. This range may not suit all your requirements all the time, so you can scale and shift it. How do you scale it? You scale it using the modulo operator. So अगर आप इस for example, this is how scaling works. If you take the modulo of x with y, so your range would become from 0 to y minus 1, ठीक है. And you can do shifting as well. This is the minimum value and the maximum. If you want to change these minimum and maximum values after scaling, so you can do shifting. You can add a constant value to it, ठीक है. So you can do that shifting. For example, let us look at another example. uh, and this is how you change the seed of the random number generator, ठीक है. अच्छा, let us let us do shift change the range. For example, if you want values in the range say minus 5 to plus 5, ठीक है. We want values in the range minus 5 to plus 5. अच्छा, वो कैसे कर सकते हैं? So these values, ठीक है. This particular expression, this is going to give us values in the range 0 to 5, 0 to 5. अच्छा, अब 0 to 5 के साथ we need to shift it in a way कि हमें -5 to 5 values मिलें, -5 to 5 values मिलें, ठीक है. So how can we do that? How can we do that? So for example, uh, if we say for example, if we subtract 5 from it, ठीक है, तो इससे रेंज क्या हो जाएगी? इससे रेंज हो जाएगी, यानी इसकी मिनिमम वैल्यू 0 थी, 0 माइनस 5 इज माइनस 5, और इसकी मैक्सिमम वैल्यू थी 5, ठीक है. सो 5 माइनस 5 इज 0, तो इसकी रेंज हो जाएगी -5 to 0. विद दिस ऑपरेशन इट्स रेंज वुड बिकम -5 to 0, ठीक है. अच्छा, लेट अस वेरीफाई दैट कि ऐसा होता है या नहीं होता. So now the range is between -5 and 0, -5 and 0, ठीक है. अच्छा, but we want the range to be between -5 and 5. Okay, so we want the minimum value to be -5 and the maximum value to be 5. So how can we achieve that? How can we achieve that? So uske liye what we should be doing is ke we should have a random number generator जो कि say values generate करे between uh, wait, let us postpone that discussion to say another time, uh, because not because of any problem, but uh, that might complicate this expression in a little way. So let us postpone that discussion for a certain while. Let us continue whatever we wanted to do in this lecture here, ठीक है. अच्छा, so what have we done so far? What we did so far was we learned how to declare an array of a particular size. We initialized that array with an initializer list, and we looked at the different possibilities there. We initialize the array with input from the user, and we initialize the array with random values. So we talked about the random number generator, how to scale and shift it, and we also talked about changing the seed value of the random number generator. Okay, now there's another thing that we need to talk about, and that is कि यहाँ पे if you look here, ठीक है, we have right now we have one loop. Right now we have one loop जिसमें हम array के elements को we are initializing those elements with random values, and then we are printing those values, ठीक है. So we are doing both these things in just a single loop. but we can have multiple loops that access the same array. Okay, we can have that possibility as well. So if you change the size of the array, then you have to change these arrays, these loops. For example, if we change the size of the array to 20, so then we need to change this loop. This would become then 19 or 20 minus 1. Okay? And similarly, if we are doing something else with this array, so we'll need to write another loop, and that loop would also use upper bound for the index. And if we change the size of the array, so the size of those loops must also be changed. Okay, so there is a better way of doing these things. These things, those things. That way is what we should do instead is, let us build and run this program. So now we have 20 elements. Okay. अच्छा यहाँ पे let us change this scaling. Hmm. So scaling हम change कर देते हैं. Let us make it from 1 to 9. ठीक है. So this is plus 1 and this is 9. ठीक है. So scaling को हमने 1 to 9 कर दिया. Range जो है वो random number generator की, that is from 1 to 9. ठीक है. अच्छा. So what are we trying to demonstrate here? We are trying to demonstrate here कि if you change the size of the array, then that change requires you to make changes to these loops which access this array, either for printing or for initializing or for some other operation. So you need to change, you need to do that change. ठीक है, आपको ये change करना होगा इन loops को भी. अच्छा, this can be hectic, like this can be error prone. इसमें आप errors, you can make errors in this process and this can create problems. So there is an easy way of doing it. What if we can specify the size of the array using some variable? ठीक है. Now you can do that. We can specify the size of the array using some variable, and then we can change that variable to different values. We can assign it different values, and then we won't need to change the size of the array. ठीक है. So we can do that, but that variable must be a constant integer. That variable must be a constant integer. So let's see how can we do that in the first case, and then let's see something else. So let us declare a constant integer, and let us call it as array size. Okay, array size. So it is a constant integer. As we have learned about constant variables, they must be declared at the time of, they must be initialized at the time of declaration. So we can say array size is 15, and then you can specify array size like this. You can say int array, and it is array size. And here in the loops you can use the variable array size. You won't need to change it every time you change array size. ठीक है. अच्छा, let us see if it works or not. अच्छा, let us build and run this code. So it works. Like we have changed the array size to 15 and everything works fine. ठीक है. If you change the array size to say 100 or say 50, you just need to make this change here. You don't need to make this change here or any of the loops that access that array, that access elements of that array. You just need to make it that change once, and the entire code will work fine. Okay, so this is basically the benefit of using a constant variable for storing array size or specifying array size. This is the benefit of doing that. Acha, this is done. Now can we like do away with this const? Can we use a normal variable to specify array size? No, you cannot do that. The array size is constant. You have to specify it either using a constant integer value or using a constant variable, a constant integer variable. So these are the two choices that you have. You have to specify it using these two possible these two possible choices. You cannot do it this way. If you do it this way, this would be a syntax error. ठीक है? This should be a syntax error. Why didn't it specify? Let us build and run it. Let us build it. It didn't say anything. This is surprising. Okay. Okay, it should have been a syntax error, but maybe the either it has been changed in the new C++ standard, or this particular compiler does not follow the standard. But in any case, this does not mean that you can change the size of the array dynamically. Okay? It does not mean that you can change the size of the array dynamically. Like if you say array size is equal to say 30. Let us do that. Okay? So first we use the array size as uh, 50. We create this array of size 50. We initialize it with these random values. Done. We print those values. Then we change the array size to say 20. ठीक है? अच्छा, does that mean कि ये array जो है वो इसका size change हो जाएगा, ये 20 elements की हो जाएगी? ठीक है? No, it does not mean that. ठीक है? There is no way that you can change the size of the array after it has been declared or initialized. उसके बाद फिर आप इसके साइज को नहीं चेंज कर सकते. इसका इफेक्ट क्या होगा? आपने array size को चेंज कर दिया. So let us copy and paste it. यानी इस वेरिएबल को चेंज कर दिया. ठीक है? Array after changing array size. इस वेरिएबल को चेंज करने से अरे चेंज होती है या नहीं होती, उससे अरे की सेहत पे कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता. हाँ, डेफिनेटली सिंस यू आर यूजिंग अरे साइज एज द अपर बाउंड फॉर आई, तो आप पहले 20 एलिमेंट को ही प्रिंट करेंगे. ठीक है? अच्छा, बट अगर आप अरे साइज को वापस 50 कर दें, ठीक है, or let us keep these values small so that they are manageable. So let us create an array of 20 initial 20 elements की array, और फिर let us make it 10 and then let us make it 20 again. ठीक है? अच्छा, so ये है array after restoring array size to its original value. So let us see कि इस प्रोग्राम को रन करने से क्या फ़र्क पड़ता है. अच्छा, तो यहाँ पे देखें, दिस इज़ द ओरिजिनल अरे 20, अरे साइज 20. एक सेकेंड, ये प्रोग्राम क्रैश क्यों हुआ? So int array size is equal to 20 and then we are creating an array of array size 20. अच्छा, less than or equal to array size, नहीं, it should be less than or equal to array size minus 1. ठीक है? क्योंकि इंडेक्स जो है वो 0 से जाता है array size minus 1 तक. So यहाँ पे it should be less than or equal to array size minus 1, or you can simply say लेस देन अरे साइज, तो फिर वो अरे साइज को अप्रोच नहीं करेगा. अच्छा, ये एंड दिस शुड आल्सो बी लेस देन अरे साइज. ठीक है? अब टेस्ट कर लेते हैं. कंपाइल एंड देन बिल्ड एंड रन. अच्छा जी, तो यहाँ पे आप देखें, दिस इज़ द इनिशियल अरे, और इसको हमने, ये 20 एलिमेंट्स की अरे है. इट्स स्टार्ट फ्रॉम इंडेक्स 0 अप अंटिल 19. फिर हमने अरे साइज को चेंज किया. अरे साइज को चेंज करने से, अच्छा, और हम उसको दोबारा से इनिशियलाइज कर रहे हैं. अच्छा, तो ये 9 एलिमेंट्स जो है ना ये चेंज हो जाएंगे। पहले जो 9 एलिमेंट्स इंडेक्स नंबर 9 तक के जो एलिमेंट्स है चेंज हो जाएंगे। इंडेक्स नंबर 10 से लेके 19 तक ये चेंज नहीं होंगे, ये वही पुराने होंगे। लेकिन मेरे ख्याल में वो जो लूप हम यूज़ कर रहे हैं उसमें ये बार बार चेंज कर रहे हैं। तो यहाँ पे हम इसको हटा देते हैं, ये चेंज हम नहीं करते। ठीक है, वाई आर्ट वी डूइंग इट, बिकॉज वी वांट टू डेमोन्स्ट्रेट कि ये जो अरे साइज को हम चेंज कर रहे हैं इसका अरे पे कोई फ़र्क नहीं पड़ रहा। अरे वही 20 एलिमेंट्स की है। आपने इनिशियली 20 एलिमेंट्स की अरे क्रिएट की, ये वही 20 एलिमेंट्स की अरे है। इफ़ यू चेंज अरे साइज दिस वेरिएबल इट डज नॉट अफेक्ट द एक्चुअल अरे, वो वही 20 एलिमेंट्स की होती है। ठीक है, अगर आप इसको 10 करते हैं तो इसका मतलब ये कि आप पहले 10 एलिमेंट्स को एक्सेस कर रहे हैं, उनको चेंज कर रहे हैं। अगर आप इसको 20 करते हैं, ठीक है, तो इसका मतलब ये है कि आप 20 एलिमेंट्स को एक्सेस कर रहे हैं, अब उनको हम चेंज नहीं कर रहे। ठीक है, सो उसमें 10 एलिमेंट्स वो नए वाले होंगे जिसको यहाँ इस लूप में हमने चेंज किया, और 10 एलिमेंट्स पुराने होंगे। सो दैट विल बेसिकली शो यू कि अरे साइज, अरे जो है उनका साइज स्टैटिक होता है, इट डज नॉट चेंज ड्यूरिंग द एग्जीक्यूशन ऑफ द प्रोग्राम। ठीक है, तो यहाँ पे हम इसको वेरीफाई कर लेते हैं। So this is the initial array that we created. इसमें 20 elements हैं, starting from index number 0 going up until index number 19. अब ये जो पहले 10 elements हैं इसको हम दूसरे लूप में चेंज कर रहे हैं, और जो आखिरी 10 elements हैं from index number 10 to 19 इनको हम नहीं चेंज कर रहे। 7 6 5 8 6 4 4 3 8 6। ठीक है, तो वो आप यहाँ पे वेरीफाई कर लेते हैं। 10 वाले जो 10 से जो एलिमेंट स्टार्ट होते हैं 7 6 5 8 6 4 4 3 8 6, ये एग्जैक्टली वही हैं, इनको ये चेंज नहीं हुए, एंड दैट अरे इज इंटैक्ट। जो ओरिजिनल अरे है इट इज़ इंटैक्ट। अगर अरे साइज चेंज करने से, अरे साइज चेंज करने से अरे चेंज हो जाती, ठीक है, अरे चेंज साइज चेंज करने से अरे चेंज हो जाती, तो फिर वो जो ओरिजिनल एलिमेंट्स हैं दोज एलिमेंट्स शुड हैव बीन डिस्ट्रॉयड, बट दैट डज नॉट हैपन। यहाँ पे अरे साइज चेंज करना है, सिर्फ आप इस लूप के अपर बाउंड को चेंज कर रहे हैं, जो लूप काउंटर है इसके अपर बाउंड को चेंज कर रहे हैं। तो आप पहले 10 एलिमेंट्स को एक्सेस कर लेते हैं, बाकी 10 एलिमेंट्स को एक्सेस नहीं कर रहे। ठीक है, सिमिलरली अरे का साइज बढ़ाने से अगर मैं इसको 30 कर दूं तो क्या अरे 30 एलिमेंट्स की हो जाएगी? नहीं, इसका इफेक्ट होगा ऑन द इंडेक्स दैट यू आर यूजिंग। सो नाउ योर इंडेक्स वुड बी, इट वुड स्टार्ट फ्रॉम 0 एंड इट वुड गो अप अंटिल 29। तो 19 तक के जो इंडेक्स वैल्यूज हैं दोज आर वैलिड इंडेक्स वैल्यूज। 20 21 22 दोज आर इनवैलिड इंडेक्स वैल्यूज। ठीक है, तो इसका मतलब ये है कि आपका जो प्रोग्राम है वो क्रैश हो जाएगा एट रन टाइम। कंपाइलर तो मे बी आपको कुछ ना कहे, ठीक है, बट व्हेन यू बिल्ड एंड रन दिस कोड सो योर कोड विल, अच्छा क्रैश तो नहीं हुआ, बट यहाँ पे आपको ये गार्बेज वैल्यूज़ प्रिंट करके दे रहा है। यानी इंडेक्स नंबर 19 तक वैल्यूज़ वैलिड हैं जो कि हमने जनरेट की थी। 20 21 22 23 24 दीज आर गार्बेज वैल्यूज़। अब दिस इज़ समथिंग दैट इज़ डेंजरस, यानी दिस इज़ सी प्लस प्लस का, this is a problem and an advantage of C++. C++ gives the programmer a lot of power, a lot of flexibility, but that power comes with responsibility. Now you should be cognizant or aware of the fact कि आपकी जो array है, even though जो आपने array declare की उसका size was 20, ठीक है, but you are going beyond that range। यहाँ पे you are going beyond that range। यहाँ पे आपका जो index I है it starts from 0 and it goes up until size minus 1। so size here is 30, 30 minus 1 29। now 0 से लेकर 19 तक those are valid int elements of the array। 20 से लेकर 29 तक those are not the elements of the array that you created, but still C++ does not stop you from accessing those elements। अभी आपको stop नहीं किया, but बाज़ औक़ात maybe by accessing those illegal elements you might be violating the memory of some other program or some other variable। फिर आपका प्रोग्राम शायद क्रैश कर जाए। अभी आपका प्रोग्राम चल पड़ा, ठीक है, but if you are doing something like this is risky। ठीक है, this is bound to create or result in a problem। so maybe फिर next time आप जो है आपका प्रोग्राम क्रैश कर जाए। फॉर एग्जांपल लेट अस रीडिंग तो मे बी अलाउड हो, राइटिंग में भी वायलेशन में आए। so it depends, ये ऐसा, this is such territory where you do not know what will happen। सो इसका तरीक़ाकार ये है कि you should always at the time of declaration the whatever the array size is, that is the size of your array, and you should always keep this array size as constant. You should not allow your program to change this particular size, क्योंकि change करने से effectively there is no difference. The size of the array does not change. array का size क्या होगा, जो इस variable की value होगी before this statement is executed, that would be the size of the array, and that size would remain fixed. ठीक है, it will not change no matter what you do. It is going to remain fixed. तो यहाँ पे अब हमने इस कोड में थोड़ी सी तब्दीली की है, और वो तब्दीली क्या है कि हम उन एलिमेंट्स को चेंज कर रहे हैं. रीड करने में वो आपको नहीं रोकता, बट जब आप उसको चेंज करते हैं, यानी अरे एलिमेंट एट इंडेक्स नंबर 20 विच इज़ एन इलीगल एलिमेंट, उसको मैं यहाँ पे वैल्यू असाइन कर रहा हूँ, तो आपके प्रोग्राम ने मुझे वो असाइन करने नहीं दी, 20 21 उसको असाइन करने नहीं दिया, और द प्रोसेस रिटर्न दिस नेगेटिव वैल्यू, दैट मीन्स you did not get zero value, आपका प्रोसेस सक्सेसफुली कंप्लीट नहीं हुआ, सो योर प्रोसेस क्रैश, आपका प्रोग्राम क्रैश कर गया. ठीक है, सो you cannot access elements that are not part of your array, especially you cannot C++ आपको दूसरी languages they may not allow you even to read those elements. C++ or C, they allow you to read those elements, which isn't a very good thing to do, but C++ does not allow you to change those elements. ठीक है, तो ये statement अगर मैं comment out कर दूं तो your code then runs fine, but अगर ये statement है तो your code जो है it crashes. ठीक है, so अब आप इन elements को देखें, इनको आप read कर सकते हैं but you cannot write to them. C++ कम से कम इतनी पाबंदी लगा रहा है कि आपको इनको change करने से रोक रहा है, but you can read them. It should not allow you to read these values even. ठीक है, so the compiler should have flagged an error here when we made this array size variable as non-const. It should have flagged an error. It didn't. Doesn't matter. You should always keep it or declare it as a const so that you don't run into problems like that. ठीक है, so array size can be specified with a constant variable. You can do that. Constants cannot be changed. Constant must be initialized when declared, and they are also called named constants or read-only variables. So you can do that. So in this example, what we did was we created an array with size specified by a const variable. We did that. Acha, we didn't do this. Find and print the sum of all the elements of the array. So we can do that. Initialize that const variable with different values and the loops will still work. We have checked that कि const size को specifying the size of an integer using a const variable has its benefit because you don't need to change the loops still work. Acha, we did that as well. We specified the array size by non-const variable. So C++ compiler did not say anything. ठीक है, maybe मैं कुछ ठीक नहीं बोला जब मैंने कहा कि it would be a compiler error. Ideally the compiler should have stopped us, but it didn't. It doesn't. ठीक है, तो C++ has this feature that it gives the programmer a lot of liberty, assuming that the programmer would know what he or she is doing. ठीक है, अच्छा, that said, फिर हमने नॉन कॉन्स्ट वेरिएबल की वैल्यूज़ मुख्तलिफ असाइन की, एंड वी ट्राइड टू गो बियॉन्ड the maximum limit or size of our array. So we could read values that were not part of the array, but we could not write to them. Then our program crashed. So you should remember that. Let me find the sum of the elements of an array. Okay, and let us print that. Let us do this thing. So इसको const ही रहने देते हैं, and let us initialize this array. इसको हमने initialize किया, print किया. ठीक है, अच्छा, now let me comment out that part of the code. अच्छा जी, let us cut this thing and let me paste it here. अच्छा, तो हम यहाँ पे क्या कर रहे हैं, यहाँ पे हम array को initialize किया हमने. ठीक है, we initialize the array here. We can find the sum of the array here as well, but let us do that in a separate loop. ठीक है, so let us create a separate loop to find the sum of the array. अच्छा, sum of the array कैसे मालूम करेंगे? We have to access individual elements of the array and add them together repeatedly. So we need a variable sum. In sum, let us initialize it with the value 0, and we don't need to initialize it here. Similarly, we don't need to print it here. We need to get rid of this thing. What we need to do is we need to access individual elements of the array and we need to add it to the variable sum. ठीक है, तो ये जो array है int array, इसके individual elements को ith element को हमने access करना है और उसको हमने add करना है with the variable sum. So sum will basically keep track of the sum of all the elements of the array. ठीक है, initially sum 0 है. So when this loop starts, we are going to access the 0th element or first element of this array element at index 0, उसको हमने sum में add कर देना. तो sum will hold the value at index 0. Here I would become 1, then we are accessing the element at index 1 and we are adding it to sum. So sum will now have the sum of element at index 0 and 1. फिर I becomes 2, तो फिर उसको हम sum के साथ add कर रहे हैं, तो sum की value होगी element at index 0, element plus element at index 1 plus element at index 2, then I becomes 3, 4, 5 until it reaches array size minus 1. So this way we'll find the sum of the array. ठीक है, तो उसको हम फिर हम यहाँ पे प्रिंट कर सकते हैं कि cout the sum of the array is, and then we can print sum. ठीक है, अच्छा, let us build and run it. So this is an array of 20 elements. We initialize it with random values between 0 and 1 and 9. ठीक है, and then we added these values and the sum is 109. You can verify it. ठीक है, so let us verify it for a small array size. Let us make the array size as 5 say. So यहाँ पे हमने array size change कर लिया and now we don't need to change these arrays in these loops. इसमें modification की ज़रूरत नहीं है. That is the advantage of using a variable or a const variable to specify the array size. तो अब 5 एलिमेंट की array क्रिएट होगी और उनका फिर सम मालूम होगा. तो ये 5 एलिमेंट्स की array है. So 6 जमा 2 8 जमा 1 9 जमा 7 16 जमा 5 21. ठीक है, so we are finding out the sum correctly. ठीक है, okay. So I guess this is it for today, for this lecture. In the next lecture we'll learn how to pass arrays to functions, and we'll talk about the issues related to that, and we'll also do some operations on arrays like sorting and finding out the mean and things like these. Okay, so we'll learn about that as well. Until then, Allah Hafiz.